gentlemen, bonjour, mesdames et messieurs. Welcome to the City Council meeting for March 23rd, 2022. As my late mother used to say, you're a sight for sore eyes. It's nice to see so many of you here in the council chamber, along with our staff, members of the press, and council staff. Alors, bienvenue. We are operating this meeting both electronically and in person in accordance with Section 238 of the Municipal Act 2001 as amended by the Procedure Bylaw 2021-24 as amended. For those who are able to, please rise for a moment of personal reflection. Thank you. Merci. Well, as I mentioned, it's great to see council colleagues here for the first time in over 2 years. And it's my pleasure to welcome our guest of honor, Zexi Lee, if she would come forward, please, along with her Councillor McKenney, for our very first Mayor's City Builder Award for this year and for the last 2 years. J'invite maintenant Madame Lee à monter sur le podium avec Conseillère McKenney.
Mrs. Lee and Councillor McKenney.
People who have demonstrated an extraordinary commitment to making our city a better place through volunteerism or exemplary action. Through her actions during the occupation of Ottawa, Ms. Lee demonstrated exemplary commitment to the well-being of her neighbors and, in fact, the entire community. Like others in downtown neighborhoods, she felt growing frustration as residents were subjected to relentless honking, fireworks, and choking diesel fumes from the convoy of trucks clogging the downtown core. With governments at all levels paralyzed to see a peaceful and quick end to this occupation, Ms. Lee stepped up and took action when the public needed it most. The occupation disrupted the daily lives of residents and caused incredible hardship for the most vulnerable in our community, especially for those with health and mobility issues. Ms. Lee wanted to do something to help people in her community who were suffering, and she emerged as a brave community leader who stood up for justice and peace in the face of some very angry people. She was introduced to Ottawa lawyer Paul Champ, who now leads the legal team representing downtown residents in a class action lawsuit against the self-proclaimed Freedom Convoy demonstrators. Ms. Lee is an articulate 21-year-old public servant who became a community spokesperson and the face of the class action lawsuit. Her actions brought an injunction that prohibited participants in the protest from using vehicle horns in the vicinity of the downtown area. Ces efforts ont mené au début d'une injonction aux participants à la manifestation de klaxonner dans des environs du centre-ville d'Ottawa. Downtown restaurants joined the class action lawsuit, raising its claim to $306 million in damages for the disruption of their lives and livelihoods by the drawn-out demonstration. The plaintiffs included the residents of downtown Ottawa, represented by Ms. Lee, businesses and employees who lost wages, whose businesses were forced to shut down due to the protest. Many people in Ottawa admire her leadership and are eternally grateful to Ms. Lee for her role in bringing peace to our city. J'aimerais saisir cette occasion pour remercier Madame.
So I'd like to seize this opportunity to take Mrs. Lee for her significant contributions to the community and the entire city.
This opportunity for Ms. Lee to thank Ms. Lee for her significant contributions to the community and the entire city at a very difficult time in our city's history. It's my pleasure, Ms. Lee, on behalf of your colleague, your councillor, Councillor McKenney, and all members of council are here to present you with the Mayor's City Builder Award for a job very well done. Congratulations.
I'd like to start off by thanking the city for having me here today. It was an incredibly difficult month of February for Ottawa as a whole, no matter if you were a resident that was directly affected, if you were an individual that held the reins of responsibility in managing this whole mess. But at the end of the day, we were able to make it through this horrible situation. And while there are stragglers here and there that continue their relentless harassment, I believe that Ottawa as a city will move forward and come out stronger in all of this. Thank you.
Again, congratulations, Ms. Lee, and thank you very much for being our first City Builder Award recipient in over 2 years. I'd like to welcome colleagues who are joining us virtually and those joining from the council chamber, including those members who are here for the first time. I think that would be Councillor Kitts. And thank you, Councillor, for the wonderful cupcakes from a local bakery in Cumberland. Councillor Curry for the first time. And I think, we missed anyone? For their first time? No. So maybe a round of applause to welcome our 2 new colleagues. As this is our first hybrid meeting of council, I'd like to thank my colleagues for their patience as we work through any technical changes that may come about over the course of the meeting. Before we begin, I'll ask the Deputy Clerk to go over the main points to ensure the meeting runs as smoothly as possible. Caitlin, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. As part of this hybrid meeting, both members of council who are attending in person and those virtually will be using Zoom for the purposes of managing the speakers list. So members in person and online should continue to use the raise hand feature to indicate they wish to speak on an item. The countdown clock managing member speakers time will be visible both to participants in the room and in the attendees view if you're in gallery mode on Zoom. For members in the room, they should please use the microphone on their table to speak and not unmute themselves in Zoom. Should there be any issues or technical difficulties, please alert a member of clerks or IT staff and we'd be happy to assist. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Great, thank you. Roll call, please, Madam Deputy Clerk.
Councillor Luloff.
Barely here.
Councillor Dudas. Councillor Harder.
Here.
Councillor Curry. Here. Councillor El-Shantiri.
Present.
Councillor Gower.
Here.
Councillor Kavanagh. Here. Councillor Shirelli.
Here.
Councillor Eglai.
Here.
Councillor Deans.
Here.
Councillor Tierney.
Present.
Councillor Fleury.
Ici.
Councillor King.
Here.
Councillor McKenney.
Present.
Councillor Leeper.
Good morning.
Councillor Brockington. Councillor Menard.
Here.
Councillor Cloutier.
Present.
Councillor Kitts.
Here.
Councillor Giroux.
Here.
Councillor Moffat.
Here.
Councillor Meehan. Here. Councillor Hubley.
Here.
Mayor Watson.
Ici.
You have a quorum, Mr. Mayor.
Merci. Adoption de procès verbal, confirmation of minutes for the meeting and in-camera minutes of February 16th and confirmation of council meeting minutes of February 23rd, 2022. Carried?
Carried.
Adopté. Declaration of interest, déclaration des conflits d'intérêts. None. Communications as presented. Regrets. Councillor Brockington advised he would be absent from the City Council meeting on March 23rd. Motion to introduce reports. Motion portant présentation de rapport. Conseiller Cloutier, appuyé par conseillère Kitts, s'il vous plaît.
Merci, Monsieur le maire.
that the report from Police Service Board entitled Board Activity, Training and Performance 2021 Annual Report, the report from the City Clerk entitled Status Update, Council Inquiries and Motions for the period ending March 18th, 2022, Audit Committee Report 14, Built Heritage Subcommittee Report 25, Finance and Economic Development Committee Report 35, Planning Committee Report 56 and 57, Transportation Committee Report 26, and be received and considered, et que les règles de procédure soient suspendues afin
And that the rules of procedures be suspended to receive and consider Standing Committee on Environmental Protection, Water and Waste Management Report 21 due to the time sensitivity of the item contained in this report.
Carried.
Thank you. Carried.
Reports, rapport, Bureau du Greffier Municipal, Office of the City Clerk, Status Update, Council Inquiries and Motions for the period ending March 18th, 2022. Received. Commission. Councilor Fleury.
Quick question, Mr. Mayor, on communication from AMO, the first one, specifically on the transit element, if staff will prepare a report to Transit Commission on that matter.
Sorry, what are you asking for?
So the item is the first communication from AMO, Federal Transit Investments.
Right.
There is an AMO communication which we weren't aware, and I wonder if staff could prepare a communication and Transit Commission.
Mr. Charters on this is fire certification regulation.
No, there's a second piece, Mr. Mayor. It's
Right, Mr. Charter.
Sorry about that, Mr. Mayor. Yeah, that's something I'm not familiar with, but we can definitely take that away and prepare a response to that.
Yeah, I think we did receive word from the federal government about some one-time funding. We don't know our allocation at this point. That's the challenge. So once we get that, we can bring that to Transit Commission. Okay. Next, is on the Commission des Services Policiers annual report received. Committee reports, Audit Committee Report number 14, rapport numéro 14 du Comité de vérification, item 3, and our like to welcome in person our Auditor General, Nathalie Goujon, who's here for her first full council meeting with all members of council. Bienvenue, welcome. Item 3, 2021, a report on the fraud and waste hotline, rapport 2021 sur la ligne directe de fraude et d'abus. Received. Report on the audit of the zero emission buses, rapport sur la vérification des autobus non pollutants Sprint 1. Adopté. Carried. Item 5, rapport sur la vérification du plan de développement et de renouvellement de logement communautaire d'Ottawa. Carried. Built Heritage Subcommittee, report number 25, rapport numéro 25 de sous-comité de patrimoine bâti, Heritage Watch List, update, mise à jour sur la liste de surveillance des biens à valeur patrimoniale. Received. Standing Committee on Environmental Protection, Water and Waste Management, report number 21, rising from the meeting of March 22nd, 2022. Item 7, Community Energy Innovation Fund Summary Report. Carried. Item 8, FEDCO, report number 35, residential vacant unit tax. Councillor Eglai and Kitts have a motion, so we'll come back to that. Item 9, update of the 2022 municipal elections and amendments to election-related bylaws and policies. Carried. Planning Committee report number 56, rapport numéro 56 du Comité de l'urbanisme, zoning bylaw amendment, parts of 6015, 6021, and 6041 Fernbank Road, modification de règlement de zonage, partie de 6015, 6021 et 6041 chemin Fernbank. Carried. Item 11, front-ending report, Robert Grant Avenue, rapport sur Avenue Robert Grant in Stittsville, I believe. Carried. Planning Committee report number 57, rapport numéro 57 du Comité de l'urbanisme. We have a motion on that, so we'll come back to that, or amendment rather. Item 13, official plan amendment and zoning bylaw amendment, 112 Montreal Road and 314 Gardner Street. I believe it's a technical amendment, Councillor Fleury. Councillor Gower, is it strictly technical? We can deal with it now then? Okay, if you want to just introduce it. Seconded by, I believe, Councillor Fleury. Okay.
Yes, whereas the report recommends an amendment to the current official plan, an amendment to the new official plan, and an amendment to the zoning bylaw to allow 3 residential high-rise buildings of 37, 28, and 16 stories and one mid-rise 8-story mixed-use building on a traditional Main Street frontage, where 6 stories is permitted at 112 Montreal Road and 314 Gardner Street. And whereas Planning Committee considered the report on March 10th as Planning Committee Agenda 58, Item 4, and whereas Planning Committee carried motion PLC 2022-58-9 at its meeting of March 10th, and whereas the City of Ottawa's new official plan is currently pending approval by the Ministry of Municipal Affairs and Housing, and whereas a technical correction to the report is required to distinguish between the amendment to the current official plan and the amendment to the new official plan so that the amendment to the current official plan may be enacted. Therefore, be it resolved that Council replace the words document 2 at the end of recommendation 2 with the words document 9. And therefore, be it further resolved that Council strike the following words in document 2, part B, section 2.
I think, Councillor, there's probably a concurrence that we agree to all of these
Yes, it's
sentences.
quite a lengthy list that you
there's
see
about
on your
15
screen.
sentences. I think everyone has them. People are comfortable with the amendments. So on the amendment by Councillor Gower, seconded by Councillor Fleury, carried.
Carried.
And on the report as amended, carried. Thank you. Item 14, official plan amendment and zoning bylaw amendment 50, the driveway, modification de plan officiel et modification de règlement de zonage 50, the driveway. Carried. Item 15, heritage approach 50, the driveway, démarche patrimoniale 50, the driveway. Carried. Transportation Committee report number 26, rapport numéro 26 du Comité des Transports, Brian Coburn, Cumberland Transitway Extension, Navan Road to Blair Road at Innis Road, environmental assessment study. Okay. Hold. Okay. Hold that. Next, item 17, patio innovation program 2022, programme d'innovation lié au terrasse 2022. It can't come soon enough. Our patio season carried. This gives a break to those restaurateurs putting up their patio. Item 18, electric kick scooter strategy and pilot project. Rapport sur la stratégie et le projet pilote de 2021 relatif aux trottinettes électroniques. Carried. Hold.
Dissent.
Hold. We're coming back to that one. Item 19, painted up program results. Résultat de 2021 de programme à vos pinceaux. I just, who would be answering a question on this? Which member of staff on painted up?
It would be Public Works, Mr. Mayor.
Who's here from Public Works?
Mr. Mayor, it's me, Jen Carrera, Program Manager for Public Works.
There's a group in my neighborhood that every year paints the road, but then it just vanishes. I'm wondering, is there not some kind of paint we can use so that they put the paint down and it stays for a couple of years? It seems like a bit of a waste of money to paint it every year. It's beautifully done on, what street is that, Teresa? I think it's on Ancaster. Yeah,
Flower and Ancaster?
Yeah.
Yeah, they're
I wonder, I don't want a big, study on this, but if someone could look at, if there's some kind of varnish or something, because they do this beautiful work and every year it gets, it evaporates because of salt and grime and everything else. So maybe staff can just look at that.
Certainly, Mr. Mayor, certainly. It's not something that falls under the painted up program per se, but we'll certainly take it away and work with our traffic partners on that.
Thank you. Thank you, merci. On the report, carried, adopté.
Yes,
Does anyone wish to remove anything from the bulk consent agenda? So on the bulk consent agenda is presented, carried. All right, so we'll go back to the first item that we held. This is residential vacant unit tax. Councillor Eglai and Kitts have worked with a number of members of council. I know Councillor Hubley and Tierney and others to bring this forward, and we thank them for that. So Councillor Eglai, if you'd like to introduce the amendment, and this has the support of Ms. Stephenson, our treasurer.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. And thank you to Ms. Stephenson and her team for being flexible on this. I think most people around the horseshoe
think that we have to get a handle on the issue of vacant units in the city. However, equally, I think there are a number of us that were concerned about the penalty piece. There's a lot of reasons why somebody might, especially in the first few years, miss filing. There could be a whole pile of reasons why that would happen, which have nothing to do with them trying to hide the fact that they have more than one house or anything else. And so in discussions with Ms. Stephenson and her team, they're prepared to make an amendment to the recommendations they did. I won't run through the whole thing, Mr. Mayor, just go to the therefore be it resolved. But essentially what it does is therefore be resolved that in 2024 and onward, the Chief Financial Officer, City Treasurer be given delegated authority to waive the late declaration fee and any associated refund fee if the city makes an error that resulted in the property owner's inability to submit the declaration by the prescribed due date, if the property owner is away from the subject property as a result of entering long-term care, hospitalization, incarceration upon presentation of proof, if the property owner passed away during the declaration period upon presentation of proof, if the property owner was unable to declare due to being away for the duration of the declaration period as a result of a military posting, education, or work assignment upon presentation of proof, if the property owner was unable to declare due to the result of a natural disaster, if the property owner was unable to return to Canada from abroad due to extenuating circumstances during the declaration period upon presentation of proof, and finally, for any other extenuating circumstances at the sole discretion of the Chief Financial Officer / City Treasurer. So I believe this addresses the concern that people had around putting an unfair onus on property owners to bring this to the city's attention. It addresses the issue of the vacant unit out there that are not being used as they should be used while we have people looking for housing. So I think the motion, I hope the motion that Councillor Kitts and I have put forward balances those two concerns, addresses the vacant units, but also doesn't put an undue hardship financially or otherwise on the majority of our residential property owners who don't own more than one home and may have missed it, as I say, for no fault of their own. So I'll leave it at that for now, Mr. Mayor. I may want to do wrap up, but that's the introduction.
Okay, thank you very much, Councillor. Councillor Kavanaugh, please.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. And I thank my colleagues let's hold it a second, I'm getting feedback. Thank you very much to my colleagues.
Councillor, can you speak up a little bit? It's hard to hear. If you could just speak a little louder, it's hard to hear. Bring the mic closer. Thanks.
Okay. Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor, and thank you to my colleagues for putting forward a motion. I've heard from residents who are concerned, particularly seniors who do their banking, their property tax through a bank, and they don't see paper. So very, very concerned about missing the deadline, not being aware of the deadline. So I'd like to get some answers on what we can do for those. I appreciate the number of circumstances that have been covered off. But one of the concerns I have, and we do have the highest number of seniors in the city, in Bay Ward, to prevent just not realizing this happened and being caught out, totally innocent. So I'd like to know what can be done in those circumstances.
Thank you, Councillor, for the question. It's really important that we get this right, and we're committed to doing so. We're making a significant investment in our communications and targeted communications with specific to certain groups. So specifically around seniors and other homeowners who don't perhaps do all of their banking or their bill payment through electronic means. And that investment will involve all kinds of communications that we have in our hands and the tools that we have here at the city. I think what's important to remember here is the communications are not just necessarily tied to that tax bill or that payment of property taxes. We're making an investment in paper communications, and it's going to be a year-long process. We've actually already kicked it off. And I'm going to say that the media has picked this up significantly over the last little while with the initiative initiation of our public service announcement, and there's going to be targeted paper written communications that will go to every homeowner where this will be required in terms of that declaration. And where we don't hear from somebody, we're going to do very targeted communications to that person. And it's going to be a very specific notification that goes to them via mail. And again, we're going to leverage tools that we have, such as our call blasting and other things in our toolbox to be able to get that message out. We don't want to leave anyone behind here.
I appreciate that. And one of the other things I've come across in terms of reaching seniors is one technology that they are starting to use is text messages. If we have phone numbers for them, can that be considered as well? I've had that happen with water bill problems.
Thanks, Councillor. That's part of our call blasting technology that we have. So if it can go to a home phone number, a cell phone number, a text message, we can use those and leverage them to get the messaging out.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor. Next is Councillor El-Shantiri, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and forgive me, Madam Treasurer. I know you answered the question, but we didn't hear nothing earlier. So the question we get asked time and time again, if people dealing with the banking, how would they be able to be notified? That's the question we receive many times. And the other question is, why do they have to do it every year? If they just declare they live on 123 Elgin, why do they have to declare that every year? And please speak closer to the mic so we can hear you.
Thank you, Councillor. I think your first question was, how do we deal with the banking? Is that correct? Yes.
Yes.
So the communications are not going to go specifically and directed with the tax bill. They will be part of that communication plan. However, we're going to send several communications via letter format and inserts and notifications to people well in advance. So we've kicked off the campaign. We're going to send probably 5 or 6 different communications to a person outside of that property tax bill, so they are well aware of everything that they need to do. We're also going to leverage all kinds of other tools that we have in terms of using our social media, the city's website, Twitter and things like that. And then also leveraging local associations, community groups, the real estate association to really get that message out. So we're going to take a very wide stance in terms of those communications to make sure that everyone knows. If someone's paying with their mortgage institution, which is I think some of the questions that we have received from different people, is how are they going to know that? Because they don't get a property tax bill. And remember, the communications will not be specific to a property tax bill. There will be separate communications that will go out via letter format, and whether it's that call blasting tool that we use to be able to do that.
Anything
Mr.
else?
Mayor, I don't know, either I'm getting old since the pandemic or the hearing is we can hardly hear what's happening here. And I'm not sure. Okay.
Yeah, we've asked the clerk to see, Matt, if we can get the volume up. It seems some challenge with volume.
Thank you, Wendy.
Merci. Councillor Hubley, please. And maybe if people in the interim can speak closer to the microphone if possible.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I want to thank our treasurer, Wendy, and Joseph from her team for their work on this, because I support Councillor Egly's motion. I appreciate that staff have recognized the concerns that my residents and other residents across the city have brought forward to their councillors with not the program. I think we have general consensus here that there's a need to address the program here. We're always looking for ways to get more funding into affordable housing, so I support that as well. My concern with this program has been transferring the onus of reporting onto the taxpayer for reasons that some of my colleagues have already outlined. I won't go over that part of it, but there's certainly going to be challenges to that. So I appreciate that staff have recognized that there's going to be those challenges. They're going to make improvements to the communication plans. They're going to have the ability to waive penalties if deemed appropriate. And so I will support this motion today, given the changes. If this motion goes through, I will support the program going forward. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Tierney, please.
Great. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you very much, Wendy. And I want to thank my colleague, Keith, for putting this forward, because I think of a lot of us were under the assumption that we were going to target people with multiple homes. And that wasn't the case. And the explanation why, and I'm looking at Wendy, if I was to log in and I had multiple homes, I could see multiple tax rolls within the portal. We have no way to be able to identify outside of that system who has multiple homes?
Yeah, thank you for the councillor and the opportunity to speak to that, because I know there's a lot of questions with respect to the recommendation you have before you today around the mandatory reporting. And that's really key in terms of getting compliance to this program. That's what we've heard from all the municipalities worldwide who have implemented this. You look at three options that are available. You have mandatory reporting, you have a voluntary reporting, and you have a compliance, kind of like a complaint-based reporting. And mandatory reporting gets the result that you need, because it means that people do have to tell you how many homes they own and which one is their principal residence. One of the unfortunate things is municipalities and the City of Ottawa does not know, say, councillor, you know, if you own 5 homes, we necessarily don't know that those 5 are yours and which one is your principal residence. And that's why you see that recommendation before you today. We have asked for that annual declaration. Remember, we're coming back. We're going to report on the success of this program. Every year, we're actually going to do it 2 times following the first year of implementation. And if there's lessons learned, we will bring them back to you.
Okay, great. So on that, let's say hypothetically, as a city councillor, we're in the first year of the program, and I have an irate constituent that emails us. Is that an appropriate channel where you'd send them off to your department and say, clearly there's a mistake? Now, in light of Keith's motion, it can be reversed, and how immediate would that be? Because seniors don't like parting with their money, and I don't blame them.
Yeah, thank you, councillor. Definitely that's for something for staff to take care of, and they will action that via, we're going to have a very specific communication box. It's going to be set up. It's going to be an email box where they can send an email, so you can flip that off there, or you can simply have them reach out to us via phone and we will take care of it.
And last question, we've discussed this, and I want to ensure the mechanism, obviously, probably still has to be constructed about the declaration. Obviously, if it's anything like filing your federal taxes, I rip my hair out every time. How simple or cumbersome is this going to be? Are you just going to log into your My Ottawa portal, literally click one checkbox and call it a day?
It's your principal residence, you check the box.
Terrific. Thank you very much.
Great. Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Menard, please.
Thank you very much, Mayor. I support the Eglai and Kitts motion. Appreciate that. I also support the main motion. The province has given municipalities very limited tools. We've got the provision of public goods and services that has been increasingly downloaded to the municipal order of government from other orders. And we need to augment those city revenue generating powers that results in ever increasing upward pressure on the city's main source of revenue, which is the property tax. If we don't look at these sorts of initiatives, that's where it goes otherwise. And in lieu of the ability to introduce progressive taxation rates for residential property, a levy for property owners who have properties in addition to their own primary residence and who allow the additional property to sit vacant for the majority of the calendar year. This is a practical way for the city to start to reallocate that property tax burden in a more progressive way. And so, to put it succinctly, paying to create a bed in a non-market housing unit will always be the cheaper option for taxpayers than paying for a bed in a shelter, a hotel, a hospital, or a prison. We're able to allow more units to come on the market this way, not addressing the growing unaffordability of housing cost the public, including the municipality in other ways too. The increasing cost of housing contributes to impoverishment and the other social ills that come with it. which means a greater need for health services, protective services, social security, and the bureaucracy that comes with all of that. And so I guess, in other words, the consequence of growing housing unaffordability in Ottawa and beyond is really costing us more than it would if we were to instead better invest in the creation of affordable housing now. Not making this investment will put upward pressure on taxes at every other level of government. And so the current vacancy tax proposal, I think, puts us on a path that sees us pay less overall and will target those most able to pay. I would also just say that it's important that this is mandatory. We've seen it. We've heard from staff. If it's not mandatory, it doesn't work. In jurisdiction after jurisdiction, the research that they've done shows that it doesn't work unless it's mandatory. I think ticking a box is a fairly easy thing to do for the benefit that will come with this program. I appreciate staff's efforts on this and council's efforts in moving this forward, and yours, Mayor, and we'll be happy to vote for this today.
Thank you. Councillor DeRose, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I think Wendy answered the question, but I'll ask it again. Councillor Tim Turney asked, so if your own resident, you log into your MICE Ottawa and you simple check in once a year, you'll do it. And do you have a deadline for that?
Yeah, there'll be deadlines with respect to it, and those will come in the communications that we set up. They were outlined in the report as well, with the first deadline being around the interim tax billing. And again, it's going to be a simple log into your Maya. So we really encourage that. We also respect the fact that not everybody can do their business that way, but again, very simply check the box.
Thank you. Will you also be sharing those communication with Councillor's office so we can put them in our newsletter and to educate the resident?
We would be pleased to do so. Thank you.
Thank you, Wendy. I also want to thank the mover of the motion, Councillor Eglai and Councillor Kitt, for that, because it make it way better and easier. So thank you very much.
Right. Thank you, Councillor DeRose. Councillor Curry, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I didn't realize everyone was going to say what they said, so I'll make this brief because I agree with a lot of what I've already heard. But mandatory requirements for reporting, we have that for our income tax, as Councillor Tierney said. People are used to that. In the Canada North office, I think we've only gotten 3 or 4 emails on this. However, I feel like when it's in place, we'll get more, but I'm hearing assurances that that will be managed well and easily. And we have a role to play too in making sure people understand what they have to do if they're wrongly charged, how they can get that reversed. So I think we can do a lot just even as city councillors. And I agree with everything Councillor Menard said about the reason for this in the first place. So I support both things here today. Thanks.
Thank you. Councillor Luloff, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Wendy, just a couple of clarifying questions, if you don't mind, for myself and for the public. If I'm, a colonel in the Canadian Forces, and I realize that it's discussed in the motion, but just want to make sure that I'm clear on this. If I'm a Canadian Armed Forces colonel, I'm posted to England for 3 years, and I'm not comfortable renting out my home here in Orleans. Am I going to have to pay this tax?
It's a great question, Councillor. And in those situations, we have accounted for those exceptions within the recommendations that you have before you today. So no, it's your principal residence, and you have an exception that meets our requirements.
Okay, thank you. Let's say I'm a small landlord, and right now the landlord-tenant board is backed up for about 2 years, and I have no protection on my investment, so I keep my unit vacant until the backlog is cleared. How long am I free to keep that unit vacant after this comes into force before I'm charged this tax?
It's a great question, Councillor. 184 days, basically 6 months, is the magic number in terms of ensuring that you don't have to pay that tax. So you always have that leeway.
Okay, I've bought a Victorian home in the Glebe, and it requires quite a bit of updating. Like it's all, let's say it's all tube wiring. It needs a massive renovation before I'm able to rent it out. Do I have to complete those renovations within 6 months, or if there's 8 months worth of renovations that need to be done, and will I be free and clear of this tax, or am I going to have to pay it after 6 months?
Great question, Councillor. Again, we're recommending an exemption, and that is one of the reasons. So if you're doing a renovation, you have a valid permit from the city, then no, you don't have to pay that tax.
That's an excellent clarification. I do really appreciate that. Homeowners that only own one home, are we going to have to check this box every year, or can we not simply assume that, residents that have only one home in the city, that it's checked after the first year if there's no change? So do we have to come back only if there's a change, or are we going to have to check this box every year? Because I do have the same concern that Councillor Kavanaugh raised, where my tax roll is paid through my mortgage and at my bank. So am I going to have to log in every year, or can I check it off this year and then just be safe until perhaps there's a change? I'm probably not buying an investment property anytime soon. But if I'm not going to be doing that, if I'm only going to own one piece of property, can we just assume that box is checked moving forward?
I appreciate your question on that. We are requiring a mandatory declaration every year. And I say that because the city doesn't know what's happening at that property. You may sell it, you may move, something may change, and we don't have that information. So we are recommending that mandatory annual declaration process. As I said earlier, we will be reporting back annually and 2 times next year. And if we're seeing issues or have changes to that process, we will bring that back to council.
Has there been any discussion with the banks on this? If the bank is the mortgage holder and they're the ones that are processing these payments on our behalf, will they be allowed themselves to check that box on behalf of the mortgage holder?
That is actually an interesting question in the terms of privacy of information that we have here at the city. So we have to abide by our privacy laws. And so that mandatory declaration, that check the box, must rest with the homeowner or someone who has power of attorney.
Okay, these are really great answers. Thanks, Wendy. I appreciate it very much.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Gower, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I just want to look a bit bigger picture. We do have a serious problem with housing affordability in our city, in our province, in our country. It's not getting any better. Every month that goes by, it's more difficult for people to buy a home, especially young adults, single income households, new Canadians, and certainly lower income households. I think it's reasonable to ask homeowners to take a simple administrative step of checking a box once a year. The advantage that people who own property, own homes have right now over people who do not is significant. I'm glad to see Councillor Eglai's motion, and thank you, Councillor Kitts, for seconding it. And I think these are good questions around how the mechanics of this will work. I'm also glad to hear, I think, general support for this vacant unit tax around the council table. Balancing the simple administrative process of attesting whether or not you own a vacant property is a very small thing to ask of homeowners, especially with the benefits that we'll see from this. We will see more units going on the market that are currently vacant. It's a strong incentive to property owners to keep livable homes and available to people who are looking for somewhere to live. And it also directs revenue from the tax to affordable housing initiatives, which is significant too. There is no one policy, no one bylaw, no one exercise that will solve housing affordability. It's going to be a whole suite of policies, and this is a very useful one. So thank you to staff who have put this together, and I'll be supporting Councillor Eglai's amendment and the entire report. Thank you.
Conseiller Fleury, s'il vous plaît.
Merci, Monsieur le Maire.
Councillor Fleury. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
But I do have a question on the before last bullet. It says if the property owner was unable to return to Canada from abroad due to extenuating circumstances during the declaration period upon presentation of the proof. So I understand this could be, for example, a snowbird or so on. I respect the intent of that motion. I want to take it a bit further and understand if one of the affordability measures is not to see foreign buyers of homes in Ottawa. And obviously the vacant tax is that intent. So I want to make sure we don't misstep here. So if someone has a property in Ottawa, could they, but say they've said, oh, I plan to come back to Ottawa this month, but was unable to and can't fill that. How do we capture the difference between someone who actually lives here rather than is abroad and sort of excuses themselves for not being back in time for filling that box? So I understand the intent of that box. I support it, but I'm concerned that it actually weakens our hand on foreign ownership of properties in Ottawa and creates an environment of excuses for those folks.
Great question, Councillor, and I can certainly provide some clarification to that. That is not the intent with respect to that bullet that you see there. The property must be your principal residence. So if there's someone who is living abroad and has a residence elsewhere, this is not their principal residence. So that is not an acceptable reason for us to waive that late fee. Remember, this is all coming into play and will start as of January 1st, 2023. So we do have a bit of runway with respect to some of the messaging around that.
Thank you for that. As a clarification point, how will staff differentiate between I'm 6 months in Florida versus I live abroad and come sometimes at my primary residence in Ottawa?
Yeah, Ottawa must be your principal residence. So as we know, we have, I'm going to say, thousands of snowbirds probably here, and I'm going to say across the country, who go down to Florida or wherever, quite frankly, for a number of months. But their principal residence is here in Ottawa. When somebody buys a property for speculation here in the city, and I can tell you, this is what I see, and very specifically in my neighborhood, that house is vacant, the lights are off, there is nobody there. And it sits there for, it could be months or it could be years. So we have our process in terms of that declaration. You must say it's your principal residence, but also remember the tools available to us in terms of auditing and following up and complaints that we also might receive from people in that area as well that will help us.
Okay. I will support it, obviously, but I do see that as an important element to not create a loophole for those who might check the box that is their primary residence, but barely spend any time in our city or in our country.
Okay, merci. Les autres commentaires?
Other
So
comments?
Carried.
Dissent.
Sent by Dudas and
Harder.
Shirelli. And Rick Shirelli. And on the report as amended, carried?
Carried.
With the same three dissents?
Dissent, yeah.
Yeas and nays.
Same three dissents.
I do yeas
Thank
and
you.
nays.
Yeas and
Okay,
nays.
thank you. Sorry? No, I think it was the same three dissents.
I didn't hear all the dissents, Mayor. Maybe we should do
It
yeas
was,
and nays.
Yeas and
it
nays.
was
Jan Harder, Rick Shirelli, and Laura Dudas.
So anyone else dissent? Okay, thank you.
Very clear.
Next is report from number 57, rapport numéro 57, Comité d'urbanisme, City of Ottawa's
Counting number 57.
Housing Affordability Task Force. We have a significant amendment and document moved by Councillor Gower, seconded by Councillor Menards. Councillor Gower, if you'd like to introduce the motion, or the amendment, please.
Yeah, it's a short motion. I could probably just read the therefore be it resolved and explain what this is. Therefore be it resolved that council replace document 1 with the revised document 1 attached, clarifying the city's response to the 55 Ontario Housing Affordability Task Force recommendations. So we spent 4 hours discussing this at Planning Committee 2 weeks ago. And in order to capture that discussion, as well as subsequent feedback from councillors, Steve Willis and his team have made some changes to their report recommendations to reflect these discussions. So the attached report that we're asking council to approve sets out what those changes are. And I do believe it's very reflective of the lengthy conversation and the consensus of the committee.
Okay, so we have a move by Councillor Gower, seconded by Councillor Menard. Amendment carried. Adopté. And on the report as amended, carried.
Carried.
Adopté. We just passed it, councillors.
But it's in the question, we're hearing of provincial rules coming down next week. So are we expediting the response to staff on this matter?
Well, I think we just passed it, so it'll be sent to them today. Mr. Kanalakis, Mr. Willis, we can send this to the province today.
Mr. Mayor, it will be sent today.
Okay, thank you. Next is Transportation Committee report number 26, rapport numéro 26 du Comité de Transport, Brian Coburn, Cumberland Transit Way Extension. Someone asked that this be held.
Mr. Mayor, I asked for the item to be held.
Okay, floor is yours.
I will dissent today, and I shared with Eastern colleagues that it's not that I don't support staff recommendation. I do support Councillor Kitz's motion on the 100-day solution. I hope that through that solution, the agreement comes forward, and at that point, I'll review the report. So I wanted to explain publicly my dissent. Many of your residents reached out and looking for clarification, so I thought for the record that it was important. I do support the staff recommendation, but because of your motion, I do think that it's a little premature to vote on the report, and that's why I'll dissent it today. Thank you.
Councillor Aguilar, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I just have a quick question of clarification for staff. If we pass this today and we enter into the 100-day process with the NCC, am I correct that the EA will not be filed until after the end of the 100-day process?
Ms. Mayor, yes, that's correct.
Okay, so we won't be locked into anything going forward through the process, and we can have those full discussions we need to have with the NCC.
Yes, other than Transportation Committee did approve the recommendation, so that just signals to the NCC that's Council's preferred solution. But with 100 days, the intent is to go in and work with them to break the impasse. So there could be a whole bunch of other options or scenarios. And then after that is over, whatever we land there, we will prepare a report back to Transportation Committee and Council.
Oh, no, I appreciate what Transportation Committee did. I just wanted to make sure that staff wasn't going to be put through filing the EA and then maybe at the end of 100 days having to figure out how to unfile the EA and file an amended EA. But you're telling me that's not going to happen. So that I appreciate that clarity. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Leeper, please.
Thank you, Mayor. Just a question of process. May I ask that you sever the KITS portion, the 100-day portion, from the rest of the vote when it goes to yeas and nays, please?
Oh, thank you. Councillor Dudas.
Yes, thank you. I'll be brief. I just wanted to take a moment and thank city staff, but as well as the community. This has been decades in the making in terms of public consultations and conversations about how to address a need for sustainable transportation networks in the East End. There have been many members of the community, predominantly in South Orleans, that have been asking for an alternative to the 3 routes in and out of the East End that we currently have. And I think that there has been a lot of blood, sweat, and tears in regards to developing this recommendation. As it's been said, there is a lot of work left to do. There's a lot of need for further consultations and conversations with the NCC. And I do respect their stance in regards to maintaining the environment and protecting the green space that we all enjoy in the East and across the city. However, I will point out that this connection is the preferred option by not only staff, but by the community as large. It has been a long time in the making, as I previously stated, and it is truly only catching up to the extensive residential development we have already seen in South Orleans and the East End in particular. So I wanted to just state that I do appreciate very much the many, many years that have gone into this development. And I wanted to also thank previous politicians as well as current politicians in the East End who have unanimously stood behind option 7. So thank you very much.
Thanks, Councillor. Councillor Menard.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. I too, I'm going to support the KIPS motion for negotiation with the NCC. We did have a lengthy discussion about this at committee, so I won't go too much into it, but We'd received a submission, I think just today or yesterday, from Pat Teolis, who's the president of the Chateauneuf Community Association in Orleans. And his letter really outlines some of the issues that we're seeing. We don't have an agreement with the NCC, and yet we are moving forward with an EA for the option that they haven't agreed to in this motion. And for years, the city worked with communities and the NCC to find an appropriate route for this project. And in 2013, and again in 2016, option 1 was identified and agreed. I don't have a stake in the option that is selected, except that option 7 has large environmental impacts and the NCC hasn't agreed to it. We are in a climate emergency, and the expansion of our roads for car traffic isn't the way we need to be going in the future. We need to be building busways. I support the residents in this area who need another connection. And it's unfortunate that this was built without that connection. It's just the how that we're disagreeing on. And so I think we need a transit way, but we don't need the expansion of more roads, which just fill up with more cars. That's what happens in study after study. One more lane doesn't fix it. You can see that in Los Angeles or any other city across the world. One more lane does not fix the problem. And so I think it's irrational for us to push forward a plan when we haven't even had that 100 days negotiation, which Councillor Kitts, I think, rightfully put on the table to have that negotiation. So I'll be voting for the Kitts motion, and then the separate item voting against the overall plan until we can come back with an agreement with the NCC. Thanks, Mayor.
Thank you. Councillor Kitts, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. You've all heard me speak at length about this in various committees. One of the most pressing issues facing the south end of Orleans is that development has outpaced infrastructure, and development in the south end of Orleans has been absolutely explosive in the last 15 years. We just had a great debate around the VUT where we acknowledged that housing stock in Ottawa is needed. There is land in South Orleans slated for development, but the lack of transit and active transportation infrastructure creates this untenable situation where we are forced to create more car-centric developments, which really flies in the face of the goals we're trying to achieve as a city. So I was very pleased to get unanimous support at committee for my motion, which directs the minister responsible for the NCC to strike a joint committee with the city and the NCC to report back within 100 days for a path forward for this impasse. Something similar was struck when there was an impasse over light rail, and that produced a positive result. And I want to thank Steve Willis for being instrumental in helping me craft my motion. So I'm hopeful, but as Vivi Chi said, it's important that we support the city's preferred option today in option 7, because it really cements our position as we go into those negotiations. The NCC certainly hasn't been shy about their position. There's a lot of misinformation about option 7. It does not cross the bog. It would actually remove cars from a section of Renault Road, which does cross into the Ramsar border. It has less habitat fragmentation than option 1, which is one of the NCC's preferred option, less impact on core natural areas, meaning the result in the loss of fewer trees, and the cost is significantly less. So we did have a really great conversation about this at Planning Committee, but option 7 would expand an existing east-west corridor that would include bus rapid transit, a safe cycling commuting option through South Orleans, which simply does not exist at present. And, I won't repeat everything my council colleague, Councillor Dudas, said, but this is a long-standing issue. It's critical infrastructure, and I urge my colleagues to support it today. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Great, thank you. Councillor Luloff, please.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. We can't walk to a grocery store here in Orleans, and we can't walk to work. We built up our South without the proper infrastructure to support it. And this option 7 is righting a historical wrong. Listen to what our residents are saying and listen to what our staff are saying. Councillor Kitts is right. The environmental impacts are nowhere near what they're being trumped up to be. And Friends of the Mare Bleu Bog, who are tasked and have taken it upon themselves to protect this incredible gem, are in agreement that option 7 is the best way forward. The city is bending over backward, giving up land to support our preferred option. Please support your East End colleagues who have not had the same investments in infrastructure that nearly all other areas in our city has had since amalgamation. This is going to give South Orleans a transit option and take more cars off the road. Please support us today. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Does anyone else wish to speak on this item? Okay, colleagues, we've been asked by our colleague, Councillor Leeper, to divide the motion. So we'll just go through it 1 to 6 and we'll do yeas and nays if that's necessary. So item number 1, carried. Item 2.
Sent.
So let's just do
Sorry,
yeas and-
item number
yeas and
1 you're
nays on that.
dissenting or number 2? Councillor Leeper?
Let's do yeas and nays on 1, please.
All right, so yeas and nays on number 1. I'll just read it out. Item 1, approve the functional design for the Brian Coburn Cumberland Transitway Extension, Navin Road to Blair Road at Innis, for the ultimate road and transitway plan. Option 7 is outlined in the report. I encourage members to support our colleagues in the East End. Yeas and nays have been asked for this.
Councillor Moffat.
Yes.
Councillor Deroux.
Yes.
Councillor Deans.
No.
Conseiller Cloutier.
Oui.
Councillor Tierney.
Yes.
Councillor Kavanaugh.
No.
Councillor Dudas.
Absolutely.
Councillor Kitts.
Yes.
Councillor Harder.
Yes.
Councillor El Shantiri.
Yes.
Councillor Menard.
No.
Councillor Gower.
Yes.
Conseiller Fleury.
No.
Councillor Luloff.
Yes.
Councillor Meehan.
No.
Councillor King.
No.
Councillor Leeper.
No.
Councillor Shirelli.
Yes.
Councillor Eglai.
Yes.
Councillor McKenney.
No.
Councillor Curry.
Yes.
Councillor Hubley.
Yes.
Councillor Brockington. Mayor Watson.
Yes.
15 yeas, 8 nays.
Item 2 is approve the functional design for the interim transit priority measures as outlined in the report. Carried. Item 3, carried. This is the 100 days.
Carried.
Item 4, carried. Item
Carried.
5, carried. And item 6, carried. Okay, thank you. Next item that's been held is the 2021 Electric Kick Scooter Strategy and Pilot Report. I believe it was Councillor McKenney asked that this be held.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor and staff. I was not at Transportation Committee for this item, so I did want to just comment on why I won't be supporting it again this year. The pilot on e-scooters. I want to start by saying that it's no secret that I love scooters, and I think everybody should take scooters to move around, whether battery powered or leg powered. They're micro mobility that allows us to expand our distance to get to things like transit. We know that they're used for leisure, but also to get to work and just getting around our neighborhoods. However, up until now, it's been unfortunate that we have not had the outcomes that I had hoped we would have after the first season, 2 seasons ago. It got better, but the companies involved can do much better. The issue really, it's two key issues. One is sidewalk riding, which is dangerous, especially for anyone with an accessibility issue. If you're vision impaired, if you're using a wheelchair, a walker, if you're a senior, to have these scooters riding on the sidewalks is unsafe. If you're able-bodied and young and having them riding on the sidewalks, it can still be unsafe. It's unsafe. Also, the issue of having the scooters parked on our sidewalks. I know that the rule is that they have to be in the furniture zone, but on many sidewalks in the city, all over the city, there is no furniture zone. So when they're parked in a manner that doesn't allow somebody to get by if they're pushing a stroller, if they go out in the street, if they're using a walker, if they're in a wheelchair, if they're blind, they could just fall over them. And not enough has been done. I want to put pressure on the companies to do better. We saw that there was some geofencing on sidewalks this past summer. When we asked for that a year before, we were told it was impossible. I believe that the companies' profit, their aim for profits will certainly compel them to figure out how to keep people from riding their scooters on the sidewalks. They can be geofenced, but it's going to cost them a bit more money. It's going to take extra technology. And the issue of parking, we really need to be providing the parking on roadways. There's no reason why a scooter, which is used as a transportation device, cannot take up parking on our roadways. If we really are committed to micromobility in a way that it starts to shift our modal shift, then we want people perhaps not to park their cars as much, but to park a scooter or a bike or take transit. So these things, we're a step closer. But when I look at the Accessibility Advisory Committee, what came back, when I hear people who've come to us who are very concerned because of their accessibility with the scooter program, I just cannot in good faith say yes again. I hope that with enough nays around the table, it will compel and push these for-profit companies to go back and to do better and to come back with a product that does not put anyone, especially those who are more marginalized, in a position where their lives and getting around our cities is less safe than yours and mine is. So for those reasons, I won't be supporting the pilot again this year. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Councillor King, please.
Thank you, Your Worship, and I would like to concur with what my colleague has just stated to Council. While there has been a significant improvement and this program has clear benefits to reaching our climate and transportation goals, it is difficult to support this report given the Accessibility Advisory Committee's position. No matter how many of our residents are being challenged or endangered by e-scooters, those experiences cannot be discounted. No matter how fast the response time is by the vendors participating in this pilot to address a misparked scooter, it only takes a few minutes for a scooter parked in the wrong place to create a hazard. While I would like to see this technology work and be used safely, I believe it is our responsibility to listen to our most vulnerable members of our community, and hence I'll be voting against this report. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thanks, Councillor. Councillor Meehan, please.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. I would like to agree with my council colleagues. I love the concept of scooters, and I too enjoy them. But I don't think it's up to the city to continue to experiment with a product that shows time and time again that they can be hazards and a nuisance. They have to be used somewhere other than sidewalks. And quite frankly, being in the market on several evenings during the height of tourist season, these scooters are really dangerous. There's young people who have a few drinks or whatever and get on them. And we've had to jump out of the way of people just having a grand old time with scooters. And yeah, they're meant to be a fun way of getting around as well. But I agree. I think we have to do a lot more. The companies have to do a lot more to ensure that they cannot be used on sidewalks, that there is a place to park them and other things. But so I would love to support it again and to see us go forward with this project, because we do need active transportation and it is a good way to get around. But that said, I find the nuisance and the hazard just makes it impossible for me to support this report today. So I'll be voting no. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Fleury, s'il vous plaît.
Merci, Monsieur le Maire. And I want to start by thanking the chair of the committee and staff. I've been extremely hard on all of them over the last year. The pilot was not successful, and staff captured that in the report and with the recommendations that are in front of us. We at committee also did the work. The way the writing of these will happen is clear. You can't write the sidewalk, the motor will be shut down. It's a requirement of whoever successfully wins this. And then the city's getting organized around the complaints, around how to get those complaints internally to 311 and financially penalize the operators who are not respecting our clearway, respecting our pedestrian realm. So I guess, I understand some colleagues' concern. I share them, but I think that what we have in front of us is a report that changes that. I think it's difficult when we vote in favor of climate change. We want a modal shift. We want to encourage what are disruptive technologies, but we also have to manage them better. And I actually think the report does that. So, I understand the concerns. We have to be on top of it. And ultimately, it's staff that will need to procure and sign the agreement to another pilot, which means it will come back to committee. So I just want to I want to bring the context of the work that led to the updated report and the motions that were presented at transportation. I think with that, we do bring in the safeguard. It's again a pilot. So I hope that council members who will be here to review the outcome of the pilot stay true to the objectives today, which is we have an unsuccessful pilot, two main issues, writing and parking. When we come back, or when the report comes back at the end of the year, if these issues remain, then you have real tough questions to ask, and perhaps the pilot never extends. On the other hand, if the new technologies that we're requiring of them is successful, then maybe we're on a different path at the end of 2022. So let's give it one last make it or break it year.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Kavanaugh.
Thank you very much. One of the concerns I had was the parking, and even though there's a commitment to pick them up within 15 minutes or so, I still feel that is a hazardous time. I'm thinking particularly of those with loss of sight and using guide dogs, et cetera. This is still problematic, and we have to listen to our accessibility advisors, and we have an advisory committee for that reason. And I want to make sure that their views are heard. So I'll not be supporting it. Thank you.
Merci. Councillor Moffat, please.
Thank you. I just was thinking back, we started this in June of 2020. I think I was one of only two councillors to vote against it at that time. I'd seen these scooters piloted elsewhere, and a lot of the concerns that you're hearing today from members of council were concerns then as well. Of course, it was like a 20-2 vote in favor of proceeding with the pilot, but it's a pilot. And when it came back last year, I think I saw a willingness from the service providers and some diligence by the city to try to address those concerns and work toward a solution that works better for Ottawa. And I think we're seeing that again here. We just heard Councillor Fleury speak to, we heard one councillor say that they can't ride on sidewalks. Councillor Fleury addressed that. And I think Councillor Tierney is going to address that too, talking about that they're working to fix those problems. And I think if we're a year from now and we're hearing all the same concerns and all the same problems, and we're talking about a permanent situation here with permitting e-scooters, then that's the time to vote against it. But I think when we have operators that are willing to sort through issues and come back in a year and look at this again, because we know there's a benefit to e-scooters from that mobile transportation perspective, from that alternative option. And they're widely popular in communities like downtown, where they're used all over. I see them around Lansdowne. And yes, there's no question that some of them are used inappropriately and parked inappropriately. And those are the things that need to be addressed. And the only way to really address those is not necessarily by banning them outright, but by working with the providers to find a better solution, and then come back a year from now and say, if that's happened, then we can move forward. And if it hasn't happened, then they need to know that it's over. But I think what we're seeing right now is further movements from the providers than we saw a year ago. I think that, to me, gives me more reason to let this pilot go on one more year before, putting nails in the coffin. Thank you.
Great, thank you. Councillor Curry, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Listening to all these various comments, Councillor King makes some very good points. Councillor Meehan makes some very good points. And I think we have to be cognizant of that. When I hear Councillor Fleury saying that we have been, then that makes me feel that we should support this. Because Councillor King's points are very important. We have to make sure that we have listened to what we learned in the pilot. And I think this motion is indicating that we have. I met with the scooter company and I made those very points. And what about these people, driving on the sidewalks at high speeds? What about people leaving their scooters everywhere? And they had very good answers. The geofencing, the continuing to charge people until they actually officially park it and park it properly. Like, those are pretty significant solutions, I feel. So I will be supporting this. And I just would say to colleagues that are hesitant that I really hope that when we get our next report back, that those solutions really were fixed. Thank you.
Great, thank you, Councillor Tierney.
Great, thank you very much. And I just want to point out a couple of things. First of all, big thank you to Councillor Fleury. Look, a lot of the issues that he's brought forward over the last couple of years are certainly things that we've all seen. What staff have done is nothing more than miraculous by putting the screws to these e-scooter companies, by forcing them to change what they're doing. Just a quick reminder, we're actually in the report, and people had attended a very lengthy and good debate at Transportation Committee. Thank you, because you heard a lot of the points. You won't be able to ride the new generation scooters, and that's what they're required to bring to the table on the sidewalks. You won't be able to park them illegally. If you're riding in a regular fashion, you can be canned from the app very quickly. We've also put some big constraints on the fact that instead of from 1 hour, they have 15 minutes to pick up their scooter. Otherwise, it's going to the pound, and they're going to have to pay to get it out. We also are going from 1,200 scooters down to 900. So they have to be more agile and get out there and pick up their scooters if there's any problems. We've come up with a reporting system that's centralized. There's a lot of points in here that support one more year of a pilot project, and we'll see how it goes with the new technology. We've told them all, don't bother bringing your old antiquated technology. It won't work. The two that come through the gate are going to be tested by city staff. I even asked during committee if staff would be able to meet with councillors and show them the technology to show that it actually works. We have a lot of gates in this one before they actually get rolling on the streets of Ottawa. So I feel very confident. I think the most important question I asked was, if a company does not live up to the reputation, can we pull their card, or we have to wait a whole season? And the answer was yes, we'll pull their card. So I asked council colleagues for their support today on one more year of the pilot. Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor.
Great, well said, thank you. So on the report, yeas and nays?
Councillor Moffat.
Yes.
Councillor Darousse.
Yes.
Councillor Deans.
No.
Conseil Cloutier.
Oui.
Councillor Tierney.
Yes.
Councillor Kavanaugh.
No.
Councillor Dudas.
Yes.
Councillor Kitts.
Yes.
Councillor Harder.
Yes.
Councillor El Shantiri.
Yes.
Councillor Menard.
Yes.
Councillor Gower.
Yes.
Conseil Fleury.
Oui.
Councillor Luloff.
Yes.
Councillor Meehan.
No.
Councillor King.
No.
Councillor Leeper.
No.
Councillor Shirelli.
Yes.
Councillor Eglai.
No.
Councillor McKenney.
No.
Councillor Curry.
Yes.
Councillor Hubley.
Yes.
Councillor Brockington, Mayor Watson.
Yes.
16 yeas, 7 nays.
Okay, thank you. Motion to adopt reports. Motion portant adoption de rapport. Conseiller Cloutier, appuyé par conseillère Kitts, s'il vous plaît.
Merci, Monsieur le maire. Que le rapport de la Commission de services policiers d'Ottawa intitulé
That the
rapport
report from Police Services Board entitled Board Activity, Training and Performance 2021 Annual Report, the report from City Clerk entitled Status Update, Council Inquiries and Motions for the period ending March 18, 2022, Audit Committee Report 14, Built Heritage Subcommittee 25, Standing Committee on Environmental Protection, Water and Waste Management Report 21, Finance and Economic Development Committee Report 35, Planning Committee Reports 56 and 57, and Transportation Committee Report 26 be received and adopted as amended. Carried.
Previously given. Heard from City Council February 9, 2022. Councillor Deans, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. At the end of January, Councillor King and I introduced a notice of motion that would reaffirm Council's opposition to Quebec's Bill 21 and join many other Canadian municipalities in providing a one-time financial contribution to support the joint legal challenge to the bill being brought by the National Council of Canadian Muslims, the World Sikh Organization, and the Canadian Civil Liberties Association. As you know, Bill 21 prohibits persons from wearing religious symbols while exercising their functions in workplaces, in schools, and in government institutions. This predominantly targets religious and ethnic minorities who wear religious symbols such as hijabs, kippas, and turbans. The most recent example of Bill 21 being exercised was right next door in Chelsea, Quebec, where a grade 3 teacher, a much loved grade 3 teacher, was removed from her classroom for wearing a hijab. This is nothing other than discrimination. And as Canadians, we cannot stand by and let our rights be eroded. Ottawa is an incredibly diverse city, and as our nation's capital, we must be leaders and protect our racialized communities against discrimination and uphold our shared values of tolerance and diversity. While some might say this is not Ottawa's problem, I think the most recent displays of racist symbols during the Ottawa occupation was a stark reminder that racism does not stop at the border between Ontario and Quebec. Having said that, Mr. Mayor, I have been asked by members of the communities most adversely impacted by Bill 21 to withdraw the motion today to allow those community groups to have more time, the time they believe they need to organize around this very important issue for them. So with that said, Councillor King and I have discussed it and have decided to withdraw the motion today, and we will bring it back at a later date when community organizations believe that they're ready to have this debated on the floor of council. Thank you.
Okay, with council's permission to withdraw. Okay, next item is by Councillor Fleury, a revised motion that has been circulated with a procedure memo Councillor Fleury, if you'd like to introduce your revised motion and tell us what the changes are.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. I wonder if Clerk, if it could be added to the screen. While that's being done, I want to thank Steve Kay and the city's senior management office for following last council meeting, helping with some of the wording to be more comprehensive and capture both the political and city needs in this effort of reviewing its governance. I also want to thank colleagues, specifically Councillor King, Councillor Duda, Councillor Gower, Councillor Kitts for meeting over the March break, really, to go over a number of these elements. We want to show unity in this matter. If we are going to speak about serious capital city governance, we need unity at council. If we can get unity on this vote, then when we speak to our provincial counterparts and federal counterparts, we can have a serious conversation about tools we need of governance in the capital city. So because it's been amended, Mr. Mayor, I'll read the motion, and then I'm certainly open for any for additional context if Steve or other council members want to add as they've helped me draft and to get to today's amended motion, which reads, whereas Ottawa is Canada's capital city in the heart of the National Capital Region, whereas the City of Ottawa takes pride in being the second home for all Canadians while being one of the largest cities in Canada, whereas welcoming Canadians and international visitors is generally very positive to our local economy and to our image as a city, and whereas as Canada's capital, Ottawa is also subject to 3 layers of government jurisdictions and oversight, federal, provincial, and city, and impacted by governments of the province of Quebec and of the city of Gatineau as neighbors and partners in the National Capital Region. Whereas being Canada's capital city, the City of Ottawa is exposed to many risks and responsibilities that are well beyond our local ability to plan, legislate, support, and pay for. And whereas the illegal occupation that overtook our Ottawa's downtown core from January 28th to February 20th is an example of both the risk and challenges the City of Ottawa experiences in its dual role of local municipality in Canada's capital. And whereas over these many weeks, the scope and complexity of the occupation required more workforce and more legislative tools than just the Ottawa Police Services and the City of Ottawa could provide. And whereas the requirement to deal with the illegal occupation resulted in the Ottawa Police needing to pull officers from neighborhoods, leaving local communities vulnerable, whereas Ottawa's first response and responsibilities should be to the Ottawa residents and businesses to properly serve and protect them consistent with all local government and local police forces, whereas the ultimate dismantling of the occupation required integrated policing efforts for multiple policing jurisdictions, as well as additional legislative tools from the federal and provincial governments. And whereas the occupation also highlighted the risk inherent in the current ad hoc approach to dealing with the unique multi-jurisdictional challenges of emergency operations through Ottawa, but most particularly in the parliamentary precinct, the downtown core, and the interprovincial crossings. And whereas the occupation highlighted the need to have a better and common understanding of the dual nature of Ottawa and the risk that come with being a capital and the risk of pressures that go well beyond the city's responsibility and ability to respond, whereas such pressures include monitoring and responding to the federal precinct and the most recent proposal to look at the feasibility of permanent closures of Wellington Street. Whereas the local property tax base, residents and businesses should not be expected to be accountable to the cost of activities that go beyond our responsibilities as a local government. And whereas it's became clear that the establishment of a formalized structure which integrates and clarifies the roles and responsibilities of the various jurisdictional bodies that govern Ottawa and the National Capital Region will ensure a timelier, coordinated response to emergent threats, and crises. Therefore, be it resolved that Council requests that the federal government strike a working group of both administrative and elected officials from I believe it should say all three levels, but I think the fourth level is the City of Gatineau, just to clarify, senior staff, agencies, including PSPC, the National Capital Commission, Indigenous leaders, and representatives from the City of Gatineau to propose a plan to modernize, clarify, and strengthen the integration of Ottawa's capital jurisdictional responsibilities and security needs to A, remove the financial burden of the capital events from residents and businesses in Ottawa, B, renew and redefine the capital's responsibility and clarify further authorities and any related legislative changes, and C, strengthen the security of the national capital through timely coordinated responses for future or emergent threats and crises. Be it further resolved that the working group report back to City Council and all members of the provincial and federal parliaments with the working group's finding by July 2022. And if you might, Mr. Mayor, I did catch a minor mistake there. It should say three levels of government in a therefore be resolved. If that could be quickly amended, I would appreciate that.
Okay, thank you. Councillor King.
Thank you, Your Worship. I'm pleased to support and second this motion calling for the creation of a jurisdictional working group, because in times of crisis, all governments must work together efficiently and effectively. In order to ensure adequate emergency response, whether during a natural disaster or a crisis precipitated by mass civil disobedience, effective intergovernmental relations is key. Residents expect us to cooperate and forge effective emergency management partnerships with the provincial and federal government in order to preserve public order and maintain public safety. When the next national crisis impacts this city, and at some point it will be imperative that we provide a rapid and effective response, as well as remove barriers between governments that create excessive complexity, along with bureaucratic delay and inaction. I welcome a working group that will ultimately seek a well-coordinated and well-managed approach to responding to crises that would examine the establishment of appropriate government-to-government arrangements and pre-disaster and pre-crisis preparedness and response arrangements. Coordination of government response is a core purpose for emergency management, and as a result, I agree with Councillor Fleury's initiative to propose a plan to modernize emergency response in our city. It is also important that we remove the financial burden of national events from residents and businesses in Ottawa. Currently, the formulas determining compensation for policing national events, for example, are completely inadequate and require reassessment. This motion works to analyze and correct such deficiencies, and as a result, I'm therefore extremely gratified to both second and support this motion. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thanks, Councillor King. Est-ce qu'il y a des autres commentaires? Are there other comments? On the motion, carried, adopté. Motions requiring suspension of the rules and procedures. First is a motion by myself, seconded by Councillor Kitts, with respect to property tax deferral for businesses in the area impacted by the occupation. On suspension, carried. I'll just read it out for the benefit of members of the public who may not have a copy of it. Whereas the city was subject to a significant and protracted protest and occupation of streets and public areas in and adjacent to the downtown core for a period of 3 weeks, and whereas this disruption and the resulting street closures, noise, and unacceptable behavior by protesters severely impacted business operations in the affected area, with many businesses unable to open in a safe environment for employees and customers and opting to limit operating hours or close. And whereas the interim property tax bills have been sent and required payment by March 17, 2022, whereas pursuant to Section 342 of the Municipal Act 2001, Council may establish parts of the municipality with different due dates for taxes by property class, and the city treasurer may receive and approve taxpayers' requests to use the alternative due dates. And whereas Council directed the CFO, city treasurer, to report back to Council on March 9th with a proposal to defer the interim 2022 property taxes for affected businesses in the area impacted by occupation. And whereas the chief financial officers established the criteria for established eligibility for property tax deferral of the interim and final tax bill in 2022 as further described in Schedule A. Therefore, be it resolved that the CFO be directed to implement a 2022 property tax hardship deferral program for City of Ottawa commercial and retail owners in accordance with the eligibility criteria identified in Schedule A and Schedule B as soon as possible following the adoption of this motion. Be it further resolved, the CFO provide eligible businesses and with information on their tax deferral options as soon as possible following the adoption of this motion. Be it further resolved that landlords be required to pass the property tax deferral on to their commercial and retail tenants. And finally, be it further resolved that the associated costs of any tax deferral under the program be funded from the tax stabilization reserve, and that the city seek to recover the costs from other levels of government in the request for compensation for the occupation. I want to thank those three colleagues who we work with on small business items, Councillors Dudas, El Shantiri, and Harder, for their help on this, and Councillor Kitts for seconding the motion. This is, as I think Councillor Menard pointed out a little while ago, we have very few tools in our toolkit to help businesses in a direct fashion. This is one of the ways we can do it, by deferring the property taxes for those small businesses in the area affected, and really many instances devastated by the complete shutdown of the downtown core and Byward Market and Rideau Street. So attached is a list of the criteria as well as the map of the area under consideration by you as members of council. And I'd encourage members to support this initiative. It's a small gesture, but it will allow these small businesses to deal with a number of cash flow problems that they're experiencing now post the occupation. Alors, certainement, c'est une occasion pour nous autres d'appuyer les petites entreprises dans la ville
This is an
d'Ottawa.
opportunity for us to support small businesses in Ottawa and to save a few dollars for small businesses who have been affected
Dans le
by
centre-ville.
the protests in downtown, Lower Town, and Rideau Street.
Quick question, Mr. Mayor, but thank you for your effort and my colleagues on this one. But when one of the clauses, it says require the landlord, can that be, I'm asking the treasurer, can that be changed? Because some of the landlords, they refuse to enter the program, and we're seeing even with the federal, they refuse to enter that. Is there something could be more than required?
Thank you, Councillor, for that question. It is a bit of a sticking point for us from the perspective of where that property tax bill goes, because it goes to the owner of the building, who is the landlord, who then passes on this benefit to their tenants. What we've done in terms of putting this motion and this program in front of you today is extensive consultation with the Ottawa Board of Trade, Acobia, our partners in economic development, who have actually taken the information, the draft motion, and shared it with all of the partners and businesses downtown. So they're well aware of what's happening. And so that will give a communication stream to those tenants up to their landlords and owners to say, hey, you need to apply for this to help us.
Okay, well, that's a little bit different from what the federal does. So I'm pleased to see this. Thank you so much. Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and I hope my colleague will support this effort. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Councillor. Thank you for your work with the Council of BIAs as well. On the motion, carried. Adopté?
Carried.
The next motion requiring suspension of the rules of procedure by Councillor Dudas, seconded by Councillor El Shantiri, with respect to National Capital Region police jurisdictions, has some overlap with the Fleury motion that we just saw. So Councillor Dudas, if you'd like to introduce this, and seconded by Councillor El Shantiri.
Yes, Mr. Mayor, thank you very much.
Sorry, I apologize. Suspension? Carried? Sorry.
Thank you. As you noted, there is some overlap, certainly with Councillor Fleury's motion that we just passed. However, I think that we've all been trying to find a way to address the issues with jurisdiction that we saw arose during the recent occupation of our city. This motion specifically speaks to police jurisdiction and the difficulties we saw between communications of the multi-levels of policing in our city, as well as the fact that the federal government needs to fully step up and recognize that we are a nation's capital. And these types of demonstrations, these types of engagements with legal and non-legal protests need to be taken in a very serious manner, in a democratic manner, but certainly it cannot all be on the burden of the City of Ottawa. from a resourcing level, from a financial level, and also on the burden of our downtown residents who really shouldered this. So I want to thank Councillor El Shantiri. He and I had both been working on independent motions that when we determined that they were both complementary to each other, that we decided to collaborate together on this. I will read it. It is in parts a little bit complementary and redundant to what Councillor Fleury had mentioned, but I think it's important that we recognize that this needs to be relooked at, and it's the obligation of the province and the federal government to take over this responsibility at looking at policing jurisdiction. So whereas the National Capital Region crosses the boundaries of 2 provinces and encompasses 2 major municipalities, as well as lands under the jurisdiction of the federal government, whereas there are multiple levels of government involved in and responsible for decision-making within the NCR, and is collectively represented by 6 different police agencies, whereas the Ottawa Police Service, as a municipal police agency, lacks the surge capacity required for the large-scale and sporadic events that happen in the nation's capital. Whereas Ottawa residents cannot be responsible for bearing the indirect financial costs of being the nation's capital, as well as the substantial loss of operational resources when Ottawa Police are tasked with overseeing demonstration responses. Whereas the Government of Canada does provide financial supports to the City of Ottawa for policing demonstrations, this funding is event-specific and ignores the substantial indirect additional policing costs borne by our city. For example, the additional security and policing requirements for hosting embassies, foreign visits, and etc. Whereas in the wake of the terrorist attack on Parliament Hill in 2014, the federal government recognized the need to update and modernize their security and police operations in and around Parliament Hill, and the necessity of an integrated police agency for chain of command, communications, and overall police operations. And whereas the recent illegal occupation of the national capital has laid bare the challenges with decision-making and law enforcement in this region of overlapping jurisdictions, it is incumbent upon decision makers to learn from this experience and establish improved governance structures in the National Capital Region, including looking to what other national capitals have done to overcome such jurisdictional challenges. Whereas other national capitals overcome these jurisdictional barriers amongst their various police agencies by employing concurrent jurisdiction authorities, allowing for immediate and integrated police operations. Washington, D.C., for example, employs concurrent jurisdiction amongst the United States Capitol Police, the Metropolitan Police Department of the District of Columbia, and other agencies for an area of approximately 200 blocks around the United States Capitol Complex. Therefore, it be resolved that the City of Ottawa petition the Government of Canada to initiate formal discussions with the provinces of Ontario and Quebec and the cities of Ottawa and Gatineau to put in place a new policing and security model for the national capital that acknowledges the unique status of the City of Ottawa as the seat of the Government of Canada and serves to ensure the safety and security of residents and of the critical infrastructure of our municipality.
Okay, thank you. Est-ce qu'il y a des questions, des commentaires? On the motion, carried. Next item requiring suspension of the rules is by Councillor King, seconded by Councillor Fleury. National Youth Week on suspension, carried. Adopté. Councillor King, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Your Worship. I'm bringing forward this motion to recognize National Youth Week. I'm doing that in conjunction with multiple youth organizations in Ottawa, including Youth Ottawa. In doing so and recognizing National Youth Week, we'll be joining many other municipalities in recognizing the contributions and the potential of our youth in our communities. I've asked for the rules of procedure to be waived so that we can confirm our support well ahead of May 1st, allowing time for any interested organization or community group to plan events or communications around this time. And I'll read the motion into the record. Whereas recreation benefits individuals, families, neighborhoods, and communities, and the City of Ottawa provides high-quality programs and leisure opportunities for residents to lead healthy, active lives through recreation and to make our community a great place to live, work, and play. And whereas there is an increasing interest in intentional youth development through recreation in Canada that is founded on a substantial and growing body of research to support the role of recreation in the positive development of youth. And whereas Canadian youth are often unrecognized for the valuable contributions they make to communities in Canada's social, economic, and civic landscape. And whereas it is vital to uplift youth voices, particularly during times of crisis, as they are the generation most deeply impacted by the civic, social, and environmental outcomes of our decisions. And whereas meaningful youth engagement through recreation emphasizes access, equity, and social justice and leads to positive youth development. And whereas National Youth Week reminds us all of the valuable contributions that recreation and park can make to youth development and that youth can make to community development. And whereas National Youth Week is endorsed by the Canadian Parks and Recreation Association and the network of agencies and individuals committed to the positive development of youth. And whereas National Youth Week has existed for over a decade and continues to grow, with many cities across Canada currently recognizing May 1st through 7th as Youth Week, including but not limited to Calgary, Toronto, Peterborough, Kingston, Edmonton, Regina, and Halifax. And whereas organizations including Youth Ottawa, Youth Service Bureau of Ottawa, YNRA, Boys and Girls Club, Uniting for Children and Youth support recognition of National Youth Week in the City of Ottawa. And whereas youth throughout Ottawa have been working over the past 2 years to help designate the City of Ottawa as a UNICEF child-friendly city in Canada, therefore be it resolved that in recognition of its benefits and values, and to provide a focal point within the year for increasing awareness concerning youth development, the City of Ottawa hereby proclaims May 1st through 7th, 2022 as National Youth Week. Thank you, colleagues, for your consideration.
Great, thank you, Councillor, for the motion. Les questions, commentaires? Carried. Adopté. Next is suspension of the rules, appointment of the police board. Councillor El-Shantiri, signed by Councillor Dudas on suspension. Carried. Councillor El-Shantiri, please.
Thank you, Your Worship. And movement itself, seconded by Councillor Dudas. Whereas subsection 27(9) of the Police Service Act provides that membership of the Ottawa Police Service Board include 3 members of council. And whereas on February 16, 2022, Council approved Councillor El-Shantiri and Councillor Leeper to replace 2 of the 3 council members on the Police Service Board, with 1 seat to remain vacant due to the resignation of Councillor Meehan. And whereas the City Clerk has undertaken a circulation to seek expression of interest from member of council interested in seeking appointment to the vacant council seat on Police Service Board, and whereas the clerk's office has received 1 expression of interest, namely from Councillor Kathy Curry. Therefore, be it resolved that City Council approve the appointment of Councillor Kathy Curry to the Ottawa Police Service Board.
Les questions, commentaires? Carried. Adopté. Thank you, Councillor, for serving. The next motion requiring suspension of the rules of procedure is by Councillor Fleury, seconded by Councillor Menard, with respect to compensation for the UPass. On suspension, carried. Councillor Fleury.
Yes, thank you, members of council, and thank you, Mayor, for the floor. We did get a request over the last month by students relating to council's goodwill on waiving the LRT fees and many of the downtown routes. As you know, many students have access to the UPass. So this should have come to the council that was canceled earlier in March and is required for a vote today because universities are going into exams. And for this to actually have any purpose, it needs to be executable or presentable before April 16th. So I'm explaining a bit of the timeline and waiver and why we didn't go through traditional transit commission process, because I do think it's relevant for this afternoon's conversation or this morning's conversation. So I'll read the motion. Whereas the residents of Ottawa saw demonstrations from January 29 to February 21st that blocked streets and public areas in and adjacent to the downtown core, whereas the resulting street closures caused OC Transpo bus routes to be detoured around this area, whereas the motion adopted by council on February 16th made those detour routes no charge for 30 days after the state of emergency was lifted, Whereas the motion adopted by council on February 23rd extended to no charge service to the O train, whereas the University of Ottawa, Carleton University, and L'Université Saint-Paul students rely on those routes every day, but as the UPass holders do not benefit from the no charge routes, whereas all routes near the main campus and Lees Avenue campus of the University of Ottawa and the University of Saint-Paul are currently no charge. Therefore, be it resolved that the City of Ottawa offer the University of Ottawa, Carleton University, and Université Saint-Paul the option to accept at no charge QR code passes valid for May 2022 travel on OC Transpo to be distributed to eligible students who held a UPass for the January to April 2022 term. Therefore, be it further resolved that the estimated cost of up to $730,000 be funded from the Transit Operating Reserve, and the city seek to recover the foregone revenue from other levels of government in the request for compensation for the occupation. And be it further resolved that staff consult with the University of Ottawa, Carleton University, and Université Saint-Paul regarding the implementation of this program. So maybe before I turn it over, I just want to add to context. This is simply a matter of fairness, colleagues. We've waived fees for residents who did not have to buy a pass or renew their pass or add to the purse. It's not the same ability for the UPass, which was paid at the beginning of the term. And as you know, we are approaching the end of the term, and many students will continue to stay in Ottawa and work over the summer. This is not a perfect solution. I want to be clear about this. Many of the students were asking for a straight up refund. OC Transpo said it's not doable, and I respect that. So this is kind of a hybrid model that achieves the fairness intent that we're requesting today.
You caught me eating my cupcake from Councillor Kitts. I thought you were going to go on longer. Councillor Menard.
Thanks very much, Mayor. Just reiterate the importance of this in terms of fairness. The students that would normally be taking these routes that we made free in the core as a result of the occupation had paid for them. In fact, they'd be the only people, is students paying for transit that take these routes in the core. The buses 6 and 7 in particular that affect Carleton, and of course many of the others, U St. Paul and University of Ottawa. So it's a fairness piece, and it would allow them to be able to take the bus in May in lieu of having to pay when everyone else received it free in the core after they were all very much affected by the occupation. Appreciate Council's support on this today.
Thank you. Merci. Est-ce qu'il y a des autres questions, commentaires?
Any other questions or comments?
Are there any other motions requiring suspension of the rules of procedure? A notice of motion for consideration of subsequent meeting. Avis de motion pour examen à réunion subséquente. Councillor Gower, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. It's a commemorative naming motion, whereas on July 24th, 2002, City Council approved as amended the commemorative naming policy. And whereas in keeping with its powers set out in the Municipal Act 2001, Council may assign a commemorative name by resolution, notwithstanding the provisions included in the commemorative naming policy. And whereas former Stittsville resident Constantine Luty was a long historical significance to the community and in Canadian history, and whereas in the 1940s, Constantine set out to become a fur trader, where he ran a trading post in the northern part of the Hudson Bay, and whereas this led him to working and living closely with the local Inuit, grading furs and supplying food, a long-standing tradition in Canadian history, and whereas later in life, Constantine would travel within Canada, gathering stories and photos, contributing to the book Poplar Field and District Millennium Album that is included within the National Archives of Canada. Therefore, be it resolved that Paisiana Park, located at 852 Paisiana Place, be named the Constantine Luty Park, and be it resolved that an appropriate stand and plaque be installed displaying the name and including a brief history of Constantine Luty's contributions.
Great, thank you. We'll deal with that at our next meeting. Next is Mackenzie King Bridge Capital Project. Notice of motion, Councillor Fleury, please.
Yes, I think. Whoa.
Technical glitch on my side. Sorry, I'm so used to Zoom. I wonder if the clerk could put it on the screen. Thank you so much. So this is a notice of motion, whereas the Mackenzie Bridge is overdue for rehabilitation because of its structural deterioration, whereas the rehabilitation project is being coordinated with a redesign of the surface to improve active transportation infrastructure, whereas staff are soon proceeding with the tendering of the project with planned construction to start this year, whereas the limits of the Mackenzie Bridge project are only from Elgin Street to Rideau Center entrance, omitting the section easterly towards Waller Street, whereas the current design is deficient in areas such as missing pedestrian crosswalk at the stairs of Confederation Park to improve pedestrian safety, inconsistent cycling infrastructure design through the corridor, missing the opportunity to expand the project to Waller Street, which would improve cycling connectivity east of the bridge, proposed extremely wide lane widths through the construction area that would encourage speeding. Therefore, be it resolved that all work on this project be deferred until staff submit a report to the next Transportation Committee and subsequent council meeting on how the design deficiencies identified above will be addressed.
Okay, thank you. Next, notice of motion, Councillor Menard, please, seconded by Councillor McKenney.
Thank you very much, Mayor. I won't read through all the whereas. I will go to therefore be resolved. I'll just make a couple quick comments. We recently had a devastating cycling death in our city. A 43-year-old woman who was killed tragically by a city grader. And we need to make sure that our intersections are safe and that they're adhered to in all cases. We've also approved here today an EA that could lead to a $328 million expenditure of new roads and other transit facilities. But meanwhile, while we've done those things, we've got unsafe intersections that already exist in our city. We have 74 that were identified. 30 locations were screened in for further review. And then 29 intersections had designs already being produced by city staff. So I appreciate the work of staff here, but we got to be able to fund those things. And the cost to do that is $32 million. You compare that to $300 million, expansions. We need to be able to do these things given what's occurred in our city. So I'll just read the therefore be it resolved that staff investigate funding options to advance the implementation of the 29 priority intersections, and that staff report back with an update during the 2023 budget. That'll be for consideration next council meeting. Thank you, Mayor.
Okay, thank you. Are there any other notices of motion for consideration of subsequent meeting? Motion to introduce bylaws. Motion portant présentation de règlement. Conseiller Cloutier, appuyé par conseillère Kitt, s'il vous plaît.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, that the bylaws listed on the agenda under motion to introduce bylaws, 3 readings be read and passed.
Carried, adopté. Confirmation bylaw, règlement de ratification, conseiller Cloutier, s'il vous plaît.
Que le règlement suivant soit lu et adopté, règlement ratifiant les délibérations.
That the following bylaw be read and passed to confirm the proceedings of council meeting of March 23rd, 2022.
Clerk informs me we received no written inquiries. Adjournment, Councillor Cloutier, seconded by Councillor Kitts, please.
That the proceedings of the City Council meeting of March 23rd, 2022 be adjourned.
On the motion, carried, adopté. So the media availability will begin at 12:15 here in the council chamber. Meeting adjourned. Thank you all very much. Nice to see you all in person. Merci.
Thanks, everyone.